Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to be talking about the Austro-Hungarian mountain troops during the First World War. I hope you enjoy. To start with, this video is going to be mostly about the mid to late war impressions, so 1916 to 1918, and we're going to be focusing on the Landschützen / Kaiserschützen, which are the name given to the mountain troops of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Since we're starting off from 1916-ish, as the impression guideline goes, we have the universal 1916 uniform. This uniform consists of a tunic, knee hosen, which are trousers, and a cap. In 1916, the universal uniform was given out as a replacement for all branches of service in the army. So for mountain troops, artillery, cavalry, infantry, and whatnot, you got a new uniform for everybody to use, which was pretty much the same uniform, that being the 1916 universal uniform. So specifically going over the uniform, we're going to start with the Feldkappe. This is actually the 1915 Feldkappe, but the 1916 is pretty much the same. There's not much of a difference, so be with me here, guys. Okay, so the Feldkappe, the 1916 Feldkappe that is pretty much the same cap that is used from the beginning of the war till the end. The only difference being that it is the Feldgrau version of the earlier Hechtgrau. It should be noted that Landschützen and Kaiserschützen were initially issued with a hat that did not have the neck curtains, which you commonly see in all the other branches, and it was mostly a decorative piece. But from 1916 onwards, the Landschützen / Kaiserschützen would have been issued with the 1915 or 1916 universal cap. My cap is a bit of a decorative piece right now. It has the mountain troops feather, which usually was used during parades and ceremonial duties, along the fact that behind the lines / not really a combat item, along with the fact that was just used behind the lines for photograph taking, and most of the time you don't really see these in combat, but there are a few photographs in the field which show the feathers being worn for presumably propaganda reasons. I would assume in the field these would have been extremely difficult to keep, in one piece, because they are fairly fragile, and if anything, fragile items tend to break really easily in combat situations. I also have cap badges, one of them being an Edelweiss and the other being a Landschützen insignia. You tend to see a lot of other types of insignia being used, such as battle-specific, unit-specific items, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to use. This is more of a generic mountain troop impression rather than a specific unit. But it works well for Kaiserschützen 1, so 1st Kaiserschützen regiment. Going down, we have the universal 1916 tunic, the Feldbluse or Feldblaus, because it has the mountain troops insignia, being the Edelweiss on my collar, along with the fact that I have a green strip on my shoulder roll, which sometimes was seen being done by mountain troops. The uniform itself is a fairly basic Austro-Hungarian pattern, 4 pockets, 6 zinc buttons. It's a stand and fall collar design compared to the 1915. It doesn't have the drawstrings you see in the 1915 model. Aside from that, the tunic itself is pretty much identical to the previous versions of the Austro-Hungarian uniform. At the beginning of the war, the Landschützen, Kaiserschützen, the mountain troops, were issued with a jacket and trousers that were unique to them. These would have been a similar cut with a different back, so it would have had extra material, which helped with movement and just general wear and tear, along with the fact that they had different pockets. But in 1916, obviously, they decided to use the universal uniform for everybody. And these previous uniforms would have been used from 1914 till 1915, when they were changed into the Feldgrau versions, which were shortly lived due to the fact that most units would have been also later on issued the 1916 universal uniform, which I'm currently wearing. The knee hosen that I'm wearing, which are the universal 1916 trousers, are pretty much breeches. But for simplicity, they're just called trousers. They're not called breeches because technically they're not. But then again, they look like breeches, and most reenactors tend to call them breeches, even though they're knee hosen, so knee trousers. There's not much special about them aside from the fact that they are wool with zinc buttons and generic same type of pattern you see in most Austro-Hungarian trousers. The original mountain troops trousers, which were short breeches pretty much, would have had the option to be used with a belt and a trouser suspender system. But these ones are simple. These ones are simply just basic breeches slash trousers technically, and have suspenders to hold them up. On my feet, I am currently wearing my knee socks, which would have been used as woven leggings. They would have still been using, especially the mountain troops, would have been using these because the fact that their trousers were shorter around, so they were knee length trousers, fairly short, and the reason for that was they would use these leggings as a piece that completes the rest of the trousers in case when the soldier enters a snowy area and marches through the snow and has pretty much wet socks, he can quickly change them with a different pair for with a dry pair, and don't have to worry about drying the entire trousers. Aside from that, I have woolen socks, and yeah, the most important thing for a mountain troops are their mountain boots. These Bergschuhe, or mountain boots, shoes, are excellent reproductions of the infamous Austro-Hungarian mountain boots, and I absolutely adore them. They're a bit on the, shall we say, harder side of wear and tear, so they really do still hurt my toes all the time, but I only had them for a year and I haven't been able to march around with them too often aside from the last 2 weeks, which I have been trying to break these in. So what makes these special compared to the other Austro-Hungarian boots is the fact that they have these little edge protectors, which I forgot the name of, on the soles, which give extra traction, especially when you require the traction in the mountainous terrain. Aside from that, they have quick release, I believe, hook eyelets, which is a fairly modern design in my humble opinion, and these would have been inspired by mountain shoes used by mountaineers back in the civilian days. So a lot of the mountain troops would have been enjoyers of mountaineering, and it was a hobby for them, so they were used to wearing shoes like these, and they even probably in some cases would have had brought their own pairs of shoes if they were not issued, which is highly unlikely, but still, these men were mountaineers. So, with the uniform out of the way, we're going to go into the leather equipment. And to start off with, we basically have the basic leather equipment. So I'm not going to go over with every single little item, but to simplify pretty much, we have a belt setup with the M1888 belt. The mountain troops would have had zinc or painted, Feldgrau painted belt buckles for their basic belts. Due to material constraints and shortages, these belts would have been replaced by the 1915 model, which is a simple roller buckle. And most reenactors, if you're doing, late war periods, ideally would like to use those. Those are more common, but for like mid-war, so 1916, what I'm trying to do, it's perfectly fine to use the earlier style belt buckles with the M1888 belt. The pouches are basic Austro-Hungarian M95 pouches. They are for the Steyr M95, and yeah, they are just pouches really. They hold, I believe, 10 rounds each, so like 40 rounds here. In total, you have 40 rounds. 5 rounds, 5 rounds, 10, 5 rounds, 5 rounds, 20, so 40 rounds in total. And the bayonet and shovel, this is carried the same way the Germans did it, so you would have the bayonet going through the loop. The interesting thing about my bayonet is it is a private purchase item. This one is for either volunteers or NCOs and officers. So it's the NCO type technically, but if you're a volunteer, you would have also might have been issued one of these, and there's the private purchase item. So this one has deer antlers for its grips, and it is nicely chromed. I found this in Turkey, so it might have been actually belonging to an officer or an NCO back in the day. The shovel is basic Austro-Hungarian shovel, also luckily found in Turkey, which is carried by a shovel carrier. Interesting to know, these shovel carriers would also be used during the Second World War by German troops after they had taken Czechoslovakia. It's something really interesting to note. So some items can be used for World War II, apparently. But I digress. The bread bag is carried around the back. The reason for this is I've seen two ways to carry it, where you have it right around the side with the shovel along with the bayonet sits on top of it, but I find it fairly uncomfortable. And this causes pretty much the whole thing to stick out, which makes you, if you turn sharply, hit the guy right next to you. So ideally what I do is I have the bread bag around the back and the shovel with the bayonet tool space a bit further up, which gives me an easier access point to get my bayonet pretty much. Aside from that, one of the most important items you need for First World War reenacting is obviously a gas mask canister and a gas mask, which I have to say I kind of broke the lid, so I might need to get a new one. But here I have one of the best examples of a reproduction GM15 gummy mask, which is the GM15 gas mask commonly used by the Austro-Hungarian troops. This is a Cook replica example, and it is absolutely perfect. You can't get anything better than this, and all the other reproductions out there, they can't even compare. So yeah. Aside from that, I should also have a rucksack along with a Zeltbahn, which I sadly don't have because Nestov has the rucksacks out of stock, and I'm looking to get them together so I can go campaigning with my friends. The rucksack would have been issued to mountain troops pretty much at the beginning of the war, but for every other unit, every other branch, it would have been given around 1916 for universal uniform updates. The Zeltbahn is by itself is just a tarp you can use as a rain cape as well. And finally, we have the weapons, or just the weapon, or just a replica in my case. This is a 3D printed M95 Steyr long rifle. Yes, I should be also using the short carbines, the Schützen variant, but in reality, lots of examples of long rifles being used by the mountain troops is seen, and it is just, you know, a bit nitpicky to state that, oh, why didn't you 3D print a short carbine? The fact is I couldn't find the 3D model for it, but this does the job. It has the infantry sling, but I mean, the same idea applies. You do see the infantry sling on these even being used by mountain troops, and honestly, for just photographs and short films, which what I do in Turkey, whenever I reenact, I'm in Europe or in the UK, people just hand me a deactivated one. So in here, where gun laws are a bit more stricter when it comes to military surplus rifles, that is, it is a godsend pretty much to actually just have a 3D printed replica that you can just go on to a convention and no problems would occur, because it's a plastic toy pretty much. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this short little video into the Austro-Hungarian mountain troops. I hope to make a bit more detailed videos about the history and whatnot, the engagements and everything they did during the First World War in the near future. And if you guys have any questions, any comments, anything to say, please leave down a comment down below. Please leave a comment down below, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Cheers.